You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
Everyone knows that the first step to world domination is stacking that first Benjamin. So we thought we would invite Joe Saul-Sehy, host of the Stacking Benjamins podcast and author of the brand new book, Stack, to join us on the show today and add some nuance to the concept of goal setting. And to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I am doing quite well. Yeah, it's hard to believe. It's been 3.5 years since we've had Joe on the podcast. So this is long overdue, certainly. And it'll be nice to dive into his book. I love the subtitle, Your Super Serious Guide to Modern Money Management. So that's perfect. If you've ever listened to Stacking Benjamins, you know just how serious Joe is. But as a former financial planner, this should be great to really dive into the nuts and bolts of goal planning. So Joe, with that, welcome back to Choose FI.
Guys, this was the whole point of writing the book. I was like, if I can hang out with Jonathan and Brad, what's it going to take? So I got a great co-author. We wrote 330 pages and now I'm announcing my retirement. Like, this is it. How do you do better?
He's coming out of the basement. He's coming out of the basement.
I'm done.
Brilliant. Well, you know what? Speaking of which, you're on the road right now. Speaking of world domination, you're on a world domination tour. You know, last time we had you on the show back in episode 93R. People should definitely check that out. And we took all these listener questions. We got so many listener questions that you're like, you know what? I'll just come to you. Wherever you are, I'll come to you. So tell us a little bit more about the tour that you're on right now.
That's right. Choose FI Nation. I'm coming where you are, which, by the way, whoever decided to go to 42 cities, I have no idea. That was a bad idea. Actually,
that was some strong coffee. I'll have two of whatever he just had.
Oh, I could go to that city. Oh, give me that one and that one and that one. No, so I am. I'm on a 40-city book tour, which I can't count because it was 42. But it's been a lot of fun. We are partnering with libraries, and sometimes here in Atlanta, where we're recording this, I'm at a microbrewery tonight, meeting with some Atlanta peeps, and we're going to start heading down the East Coast coming soon. We're going to Boston, New York City, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C. before we hit the Midwest.
Well, I know how popular you are in our community, and I'm sure there's people listening to this and people maybe even at the end of this episode, they're going to want to find out more. So why don't we just set that up real quick? If people want to find out if you're going to be or when you're going to be in a city near them, where can they get more information on that?
StackingBenjamins.com/stacked, and just scroll down and you'll see the full tour dates. They're all clickable. Click on the Eventbrite so we can tell the place approximately how many people we got coming, kind of help them a little bit. Plan for, tons of chairs with all of our money geek friends.
Nice. I'm eyeing April the 9th in Washington, D.C. That looks pretty attractive since you're not coming to Richmond, unfortunately.
But I wanted to have a game night, Brad. That was my whole goal. What
is the latest game that you guys have been testing? I heard you guys talking about it offline for a second. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, our mutual friend, Rob Phelan, introduced me to this great creator who made a game called Franklin's Fortune. And I hate games, Jonathan, that teach you stuff. I totally do. And if it teaches me much, I don't want to play it. I want a game that's fun. And this game actually teaches you a little bit about Ben Franklin's life and how he made money 3 different ways: as a tradesperson, as an entrepreneur, and as an investor. And so as the game goes on, you learn about his virtues a little bit. But more than that, for people that have played the game Dominion, it's like a Dominion Light. It's a super fun game.
Yeah, it is a good one. It's a deck builder like Dominion. And yeah, Shane, actually, the creator, sent me a copy of it as well.
Yeah.
You can find it I think it's franklinsfortune.com. And yeah, it's just a fun game.
Super guy too. I mean, a great guy I love supporting people in our money nerd community. And he's just a great guy. And nobody makes a board game to make money. Let's be clear about that. I believe a lot of being stacked, since we're going to talk about this anyway, is really about getting more value out of life. It's not about having all these Benjamins and burying them with you. It's about doing what you love. And Shane clearly loves making a game, and you can feel it when you play it.
You know, in 2018, 2019, one of my favorite games was Pandemic. In 2022, I don't really enjoy it so much anymore. It's not as much fun.
Yeah, you played
I'm tired of it. Is anybody else tired of it? I'm just tired of it.
Do you remember, Jonathan, how like you'd watch, Jeopardy and there's the Play at Home edition? The Play at Home edition of Pandemic sucks.
Yeah, live that. Hey, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about goal setting. And the context for that, Brad and I just finished a kind of a 2-part series talking about clarity and goal setting. And to be honest, even though we were talking about the importance of having clarity on your goal, we were kind of talking about it through this monolithic lens where you have a goal, right? So pick the right one. And as I was reading your book, I loved the book. I basically imagined if Dave Barry could do compound interest, you'd probably have a competitor. But since he can't or doesn't, like this book filled that void absolutely perfectly. I loved it. Your sense of humor and dry wit really comes through. And let me add on to that. You have a pretty significant portion of the book dedicated to the nuance of goal setting. I'll give this back to you just because I think it's so useful for the audience in light of what we've been talking about on the show.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. And I, when I was a financial planner, which I haven't been a financial planner in a long time, maybe 12, 13 years, but I was for 16 years. And what people worried about back then is what we worry about now. Like we hear about these great investments out there. We hear about this wide field of all the cool things I can invest in. And I get this fear of missing out. Like, man, is my money in the wrong place? What's the hot thing? We see it in every online forum, right? Like, how do I get what I worry that I'm in the wrong place? And I think the way to solve all that is do what Stephen Covey said and begin with the end in mind. Like you guys said, start off with where do I want to go? And then what vehicle gets me there? But the frustration that I have is that a lot of the time our goals exist in a vacuum. Let me explain what I mean. We're already a quarter of the way through the year. And I bet everybody listening to this, your New Year's resolutions are long gone. And the reason they're long gone, I think, is because of the fact that we have these in a vacuum. I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to do this. And what ends up happening is, of course, then real life shows up. And before I know it, I'm working on whatever the hot thing of the moment is. And I'm no longer doing these things that at the beginning of the year I said that I valued. So what I used to do is I take out a whiteboard, and anybody listening can just take out a piece of like printer paper, and you draw yourself as stick figures over on the left, and then draw a line that represents the rest of your life, and visually put your goals out on this paper against each other. Now, I like this for a few reasons. Number one, people talk about a vision board. And I think a vision board really works because it's in front of you. And, even before we can do language, we can see things. We're born and we see things and we learn language later. So it isn't a mistake that most of the people in the world are visuals. There's visuals, audios, kinesthetics, but most people are visuals. So put them out there and then put them against each other. And what happens is you begin writing out what your goals are. So let's take Brad as an example. Let's say Brad, instead of being Brad financially independent today, I'm talking to Brad and Brad's like, you know what? I really want financial independence to happen by 50. And we draw a circle when Brad is 50. And then he says, well, you know what? I have children. I really want to help them with college. We talk about how much that is, and we draw circles for each of the kids' college. And often, by the way, what's funny as an aside, I would find out when I was a financial planner, I'd be the first one to introduce them to the fact that their financial independence goal is maybe going to clash with these college goals. That would be a surprise. Oh, I want to be financially independent when my kid's a sophomore. Like, how's that going to work? But then what we do, we get all these things done. By the way, those are the goals that everybody thinks that we should have, which I was lucky. When I was with American Express, I worked in the office of the best planner in the United States. And this guy was great for a reason. He had this thing that we would often say, oh, retirement in college. Like, how the doctor hits your knee with a little hammer and you reflexively say, because we all think we have to do that. And he's like, those are not the real goals. So he would always use, and we should do this with ourselves, he would use the deli counter approach. You go to the deli counter, you ask the person for turkey and they slice up some turkey, they hand it to you. What do? They say, what else? What else? And he would keep asking what else until he gets the person leaning forward going, you know what? I always wanted to take like a 6-month sabbatical and go to Europe. Like, I really want to do that. And he would always tell what the real goals were because they'd lean forward and they'd smile. Where the early ones, retirement, college, that everybody says they wouldn't do that. So get to the point that you have those goals and those are all on your timeline. Timeline them all out address them as these little balls, and then ask yourself this question about each one of them. What does this goal cost? Most people listening to this, hopefully you've already calculated what your financial independence number is. But if you haven't, calculate that. And then what rate of return do I need on my money to get it? What's neat about that rate of return thing is it gets rid of that fear of missing out I talked about earlier. I no longer have to worry about whether an investment's good or bad. I can let a good investment go bye-bye. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad. I can let it go. You know why? Because it doesn't meet my need. The only thing I need to worry about is what meets my need. So my buddy can be investing in something I could say, that sounds really good. Doesn't meet my need, which is fantastic and gets rid of a lot of this exploration of stuff that's completely irrelevant.
I'd love to interject just right there, and we'll come back to this, but just to talk about how bad questions really lead to bad goals. And I'll give this back to you, but I know that you pointed to two in your book that I thought were so applicable. One that comes to mind is when someone starts thinking about doing whatever, the easiest question at hand is not a good question that actually leads to a good answer. It can lead you down a false rabbit hole. So I'd love for you to talk about this just a second, like the bad versions of the question that we should reject and then what we should put in its place.
Absolutely, because one of those bad questions is, what's the best investment, right? And there is no such thing as a best investment. There's a best investment to fit my goal. So as an example, the stock market, the US total stock market index is a fantastic place to be for your long-term goals. It is a horrible place to be if your goal is a year or two from now. The stock market in a 1 year or 2 year time frame is like a casino. You might as well go to the casino and just put your money on black versus put it into VTSAX. But if your goal is 10 or 15 years, it's a wonderful place to go. So we can get rid of that horrible question. Another thing it gets rid of is this question I get all the time. And it frustrates me because my mom says, comparison is the thief of joy. And comparing ourselves to other people, which is what people always wanted to do. How do I compare with everybody else? Not about everybody else. It's about what you want to do. And am I ahead of the game or am I behind the game on my own goals? And that really was something that frustrated me. Don't compare yourself to other people. And I'll tell you, by the way, I'm living this right now. The editor on our book is the same editor that James Clear has for a book called Atomic Habits. And what is frustrating, and I'm joking here because I'm very proud of that fact, but every time we talk, she wistfully talks about James and how great James is.
James is 5 million copies sold, right?
Yeah, like James is my big brother who does everything perfect, and I'm the younger brother that can't pull his head out of, yeah. Oh, James is good. But don't compare, I can't compare myself to James. Don't do that. Don't compare yourself to other people. Am I meeting my goal? But I'll tell you what this also does on the other end, Jonathan, since you asked that, is that there are people listening to this who are telling themselves, well, I'm okay. Well, I'm doing good enough. I can meet all my goals. Well, good for you. You know what? There's 150 million people in a study I read recently that say that they cried about their money last year. 150 million people. And you'd think that this is people living just paycheck to paycheck. It's not. While more people living paycheck to paycheck feel that way, nearly half of the people making over $250,000 a year say they cry about their money. So a mission that I know that the three of us share, because we've talked about this at FinCon at conferences, is that we're leaving too many people behind. And it's not more money. It's that our money's going one way and our values are going a whole different way. So if I'm doing good enough, maybe your problem is that Michelangelo problem, where maybe it isn't that the bar is too high, it's that the bar's not high enough. And maybe you could be bringing other people. Maybe you could bring your community along. And when I would find people that were doing okay, they were often bored, and they were bored with life. And it was so exciting to watch them when they dug into how they can help other people get there too, that you saw the fire get back. And I got super excited about that. But getting back just briefly to these, I kind of left these balls on the sheet, the vision board. What I really like about this is the other side, though. If you can't do them all, now we get into this, for lack of a better term, kick-ass conversation with ourselves or with whoever we're planning with about which one's more important. Is college really important versus financial independence at 50? Maybe we talk about the ROI of college. Maybe I teach my kids how to save for half of it themselves if it is important to us. Like, I don't want to put anybody's values into my discussion here, but you start talking about what really matters. Does goal A matter or goal B? Should I push back goal B so I can get goal A? And now we're having the really beautiful conversations about goal setting. And I find then, Jonathan, to answer your original thought about goal setting, now when I'm comparing them against each other in like WWE, they're fighting it out against each other to see which one wins.
Oh yeah, the Royal Rumble of goal setting.
I am much more likely then to go get it. And instead of these New Year's resolutions that I'm not working on anymore, now I'm working on stuff that I value, which is, I think, the key to success.
So Joe, somebody's reading your book and, they're trying to do this exercise of goal setting, right? You described your colleague who knew that people were really hitting the heart of their goals when they saw those smiles.
Yeah.
Right. But let's assume, a couple are sitting down and trying to set their own goals. Like without that almost professional financial therapist, if you will, like how would you talk them through doing this on their own as opposed to just reaching that high level? Like you said, college and retirement, like those are my two things. Like how do people talk through that?
Well, the first thing is, if it's a couple, what generally happens is one person is really excited about this and the other person is being dragged to the table, right? Do not drag your mate to the table. Do not. When we talk about family meetings, Cheryl and I have a family meeting every week. It's 20 minutes long. We set a timer on purpose because of the fact if it goes over 20 minutes for us, it's no longer fun. And if it's not fun, we're not going to keep doing it. It's not about this one meeting. It's about continuing to have these meetings. And by the way, we do it over pancakes or wine, depending on what time of day it is, to make it even more fun. Because nothing's more fun than syrup or Chardonnay, or maybe together. Who knows? Get crazy.
It's a sweet blend.
Yeah. And all we do during that meeting, we look at how we spent money the week before. We look at how we're going to spend money the next week, and we kind of talk through it, and then we're done. And I'll tell you what happens is when we have that meeting, then we have these organic conversations all week long that are about the bigger, headier topics. But they come up in the car, driving someplace. They come out when we're out hiking together. Like then we have the big ones if we keep it fun. So do not drag somebody to the table. But
Joe, can I interject there real quick?
Yeah, sure.
How have your meetings changed over the years? Like what did that look like at the beginning?
Yeah. Well, at the beginning, we realized we had to have this meeting because Cheryl and I were on different planets. I was busy helping other people with their money. I knew nothing about our money. And in most cases, one person knows where every dime is buried and the other person's in fantasy land. And the way this came out, Brad, at the beginning was we would both come home on the same day with stuff that was really important to the family, super important. Like she would come home with school clothes for our twins, and I would come home with the latest board game, like both super important. And we needed to have both, but that would cause some fights because then that was when money was super tight and we couldn't afford both. And just the fact that we hadn't talked through how we were spending money. So we realized that we needed to have a consistent way to communicate, which is why, by the way, we don't do it once a month. I hear about people do this once a month or once a quarter. Ours has to be weekly so we continue to have the better conversations that stem from it. So less confrontational, Brad. I mean, that is number one, less judgmental. We also figured stuff out. Like for us, for a long time, giving each other an allowance was amazing because she had judgment about some stuff I bought that I valued, and I had judgment about stuff that she valued. I'm an older guy. And at the time that this was happening, at the end of every grocery store aisle was a DVD of a movie that had been out, right? I mean, those have largely gone away.
Yeah, DVDs are going to be the final format. I mean, there's, yes, you went through 8-track and yes, you went through VHS. But clearly DVDs, there's nothing that can improve on this. This is the final collector's edition.
You got the sneak peeks, the behind the scenes, the commentary. I mean,
Who wouldn't want that 4 years later? Who would not want that?
Absolutely.
Yep.
So I
think, Joe, is just really your inability to present a real perspective on the value of these items to Cheryl. If you had spent more time on that, you wouldn't have had to worry about the money so much.
I totally agree. Get focused, Joe. Come on. Yeah. And I would have a bunch of judgment about that because of the fact that she would buy this. I'm like, really? You can't go down to Blockbuster and just, how about that for a throwback? Can't go to Blockbuster and just rent this thing for a day. We got to buy it. And I'd come home with a board game and she'd go, really? Another board game? Like, why? But I love board games and she loved DVDs. So we gave each other an allowance of no judgment money. It was not family money. That was Cheryl's money. That was Joe's money. And you know what? Buying those DVDs made her hella happy. Buying the board game made me hella happy. So we would do that. They've actually, Brad, to finish your question in the longest way possible, they become even more fun because neither of us is being dragged to the table. As we prove to ourselves that this is a great meeting of the minds. And oh, by the way, when I'm on tour now, I can feel when we're not having that meeting. Like not having that meeting, I feel like I'm a little disconnected from my spouse. So that's definitely how they've changed.
So speaking of board games and the impact they've had on your life,
Welcome to the Choose FI board game episode.
Yeah, we've done it before. We'll do it again. I went onto the www last week with my son and went onto a website called classicreload.org and found a copy of Oregon Trail on there. And I was explaining to him, and he shot a couple of deer and bison, and we bought a couple extra wagon axles, and Dad got dysentery. So these things just happen.
Always happens.
Always happens. We rested at Fort Wycliffe, it's things like that. But, it's amazing what the lessons that can be learned from budgeting and planning and tracking when it comes to your personal finance. And I was excited to see that you managed to weave that in to the book. And I'd love for you to talk just a little bit about in your mind, because you're having these meetings are driving action, the difference between, budgeting and tracking and how those inform what you guys talk about.
Absolutely. And I love that. And Oregon Trail does have a cameo. We have lots of cameos in the book, from Star Wars to Star Trek to Oregon Trail. But the Oregon Trail reference is, at the beginning, before they set out on the Oregon Trail, you have to budget. You have to decide what's important and you have to plan for it. And that is a budget, is a forward-looking thing about how we're going to spend in the future. A lot of people that I meet do a great job of tracking. They're like, oh yeah, well, and I take that back. Not even a great job of tracking. They have a tracking app on their phone. They heard about
Mint.
Mint.
Oh yeah, I track all of it. It's all there.
They hook up Mint. They never look at it, but hey, I got it. So what do you do? Do you have a budget? Yeah, I got Mint. It's on my phone. There's my budget. Like they checked off the box, but I never look at anything. So even tracking is much more than just having Mint on your phone. Tracking shows where your budget goes wrong. And I'll use another analogy that I like. Thomas Jefferson, we call him Tommy J in the book, because that's how I'm sure they referred to him. But Tommy J was hella good at tracking his expenses. There are records upon records of every dime that he's not far from you, by the way, is he?
Monticello is here in Virginia.
Yeah, it's about an hour away.
Yeah. So, but he would track everything, but he was a chronic overspender. He owed people so much money. He never put a budget together ahead of time. So because of that, he never really got anywhere when it came to financially. Clearly he got somewhere because we were talking about him today, but financially when he died, he was so in debt. He was in debt most of his life because of the fact that he didn't have a budget. He just tracked his expenses. So you want to do both. On the Oregon Trail, you want to plan. What do we need? What do we need for the journey? How are we going to get there? You take out the roadmap, but then as you progress along the trail, you write home. Maybe I shouldn't have played with that snake. Maybe I shouldn't have drank that water and ended up with dysentery. Like, how do I learn? And people learn from tracking so that their budget gets better. So I look at it as a 1-2 punch. I create the budget, then I track how I spend money so I can clarify the budget and be better with it next time.
Oregon or bust. To your point about Thomas Jefferson, the idea that you would track, and especially in those days, every transaction down to the penny, down to the 25 cents, everything is accounted for. And you see that you're going into oblivion, but never make any changes around that, is absolutely the essence of a false sense of security. Like you have to have that wake up call, and tracking is wonderful. It is the place to get started. I mean, we tell everybody, start by just tracking, but how many people do not move to the next step, that you're getting data, turning that into information, collecting data, turning into information. Now that needs to drive action, right? That needs to drive action. And the action's probably going to be predicated on your goals and the timelines that are attached to those various goals.
It's funny you say that, Jonathan, because it reminds me of something which the number of people when I was a financial planner I met with that knew what to do, to your point on tracking, they knew what to do. They knew what the problem was huge. Most people know what the problems are. We know where we're screwing it up. but it's not about what you know, it's about what you do. And that's where the budget really, really can make the difference.
Yeah, I love that, Joe. I mean, that is certainly something we've hit on here at Choosify, in that you can take in all the information you want. But if you're not, as we say, getting up off the couch and taking action, it's ultimately all for naught. I mean, how you can compel people to want to take action in their own lives. So that's interesting, the budgetary aspect of that. I've honestly never considered it, but that's pretty cool.
And Brad, I know you recoil at the word budget generally, but I'll give this back. Like, I think the word that is another term that is an umbrella term, and there's so many different approaches. But, I think what's being implied there is we have to take action on the information that the tracking is affording us. And then that actual mechanism of action can probably look different. And Joe, I know that you've talked about a couple different strategies for what budgeting looks like. And I know that Paula Pant talks about the anti-budget, and I'm sure you guys have discussed that. But I mean, budgeting is not just this one size fits all approach to taking action on the tracking.
No, and I'm glad you bring that up, because, man, when my life was really bad financially early on, I needed much more of a YNAB type budget where every dollar had a mission. I needed to make sure every dollar was going to exactly the right place. At this point in my life, I need to make sure that the things that I'm saving for are going automatically without me thinking about them to the right place, and those are covered. And then I spend the rest, right, without thinking about it at all. And I think that you've got to evaluate where you're at. Certainly, a lockdown budget is going to help you build that foundation way quicker than the anti-budget will. But at some point, that dollar by dollar, minute by minute battle that you have really begins to wear on you. And so switching, and for some people, it doesn't, by the way. I mean, I know some people that they love that. That gives them joy. And, don't let me put any judgment on that. For me, it wore on me. So the quicker I could get to the anti-budget, where I just automatically save for those goals because I know what they cost, and then follow them as I get closer to make sure I'm meeting the milestones along the way, is all I really needed to do.
Yeah, I'm with you, Joe. I mean, I ideally want my financial life, to bring me as little stress as humanly possible. And that might sometimes mean making suboptimal decisions, right? Like leaving too much cash in a checking account, because I frankly don't want to micromanage, when is the electric bill coming out? Oh, did we spend a little more on our credit card this month? So it just kind of all happens on autopilot. And for me, that works perfectly. It helps me pass the sleep well at night test,
Well, and I love that you brought up optimal decisions, because I think part of the reason why people love your show and they love listening to podcasts in general is so they can make more optimal decisions. But I think that too often, Brad, we solve for optimization versus solving for flexibility. I think more often we need to solve for the fact that stuff's going to come up that we don't predict. And I see too often, especially our nerdiest money nerd friends, get locked into too much money in tax shelters into these optimal places. And then life throws them a curveball. And now we got to figure out how to unwind this complexity that we created because we wanted optimization based on a set of facts that no longer exist.
Yeah, people can certainly get caught up in that over-optimization trap. I see that all the time.
Hey, this is Andrew from the Choosify team. Hope you're enjoying the interview. We're going to get right back to it right after these quick messages.
I wanted to go back to something you mentioned in passing about 10 minutes ago that I found really, really interesting. And it was, as you said, your mom's quote, which is comparison is the thief of joy. And the tie-in to begin with the end in mind, which you also said. And this, I really like this. This was very satisfying mentally for me when you said, in essence, you don't have to compete on your return. You don't have to worry about FOMO. Am I smarter than the next person? Am I optimizing my investments? You can work backwards and you hit a rate of return that you need to get to that goal, right? And you don't have to win. I'd love it if you could talk just a little bit more about that, because again, that's one of those things that if I was listening to this podcast, that would be that aha moment for me. And it was when you said it. So if you have any more little flavor on that, I'd be really interested.
Oh, I'll take that to the next level because I love this vein, Brad. I love it. Because what you do once you have that rate of return number, there's this very simple equation. It's I need to save X amount of money. I need to get Y rate of return, and that equals my goal. So once I know those two factors, now I can set up my automatic savings into whatever the right vehicles are to get it. And now I know what my benchmark is going to be. So a year from now, let's say it's 15 years out, a year from now, when I'm studying whether I'm on track or not. I know where I need to be a year from now, whether I'm ahead or behind. Like for a lot of goals, we talk about this all the time. Sometimes your goal is $2 million. And if you're listening to this when you're 25 years old, you're like, how the hell am I going to get to 2 million? Don't focus on 2 million. Focus on where do I need to be a year from now? And you guys know better than most that this compounding interest thing is where it's at. So you could be at $10,000 a year from now, or maybe even $5,000, and you're reaching your goal, whatever it is. So just focus on that milestone. But I love, Brad, taking that number once we know the rate of return and setting up the milestones on the way there. And then at a 1 year mark, let's say that somebody is doing their annual meeting about their goals, a longer meeting now with their spouse or with whoever's on their team, their planning partners, their accountability partners. And you look at that milestone. Am I ahead or behind? The cool thing is, if I'm ahead, I have some choices. I can take a break because we don't know how long we have. And I can maybe throw money at some shorter term goals instead, because I'm going to meet that one. I'm good. The second thing is I can speed up the goal, meaning instead of financial independence at 50, now I can do it at 48 because I'm ahead of the game. The third thing I can do is if I'm not comfortable with the risk in my portfolio, I can actually back it down, which locks in the fact that I'm ahead more than it does with investments that are on a bigger roller coaster. So I have all these different options. If I'm behind, I can also do some things. I can save more money, which generally, if we save the right amount of money at the beginning, why is it? Well, the market stinks. So with all the stuff going on in Ukraine right now, the markets are in inflation and gas prices. Look at the stock market as we're recording this. It's horrible. You're probably behind. So maybe I need to save more money to reach it next year. I also need to ask the questions about my investments. Is my investment strategy, what I call your investment policy statement, is it really working? Is it the investments? Is it saving? And obviously now for most people, it is not the financial markets. It's not the time to bail on your strategy, but it's a great time to put more money in to hopefully meet it next year because we know that stocks are on sale. So let's buy more. But I love the discussions I have every year then, Brad, about exactly what you're saying, because now I can make these awesome tweaks where maybe I take vacations I didn't expect on the upside, but also on the downside when things aren't going bad, I can fix it way earlier than most people do.
You set us up perfectly just to actually talk about, and I'll use the phrase that you just said here, someone in their internal monologue saying, is it time to bail on my strategy? I think this is a wonderful opportunity just to hear out your own personal perspective on financial advisors, being a former financial advisor and advocate for certain types of advice. I'd love to get your take on their usefulness and who should consider working with one.
Yeah, I want to be clear about this before I start that I am not a financial advisor. I haven't been a financial advisor in a long time. But this idea that I see in online forums all the time, and it always comes out this way. Somebody jumps online and says, hey, my advisor's recommending this, and they're charging this, and what should I do? And there's a huge wave, a tsunami of people that say, fire your advisor. And the reason is because you're smart enough to do this yourself. And you know what? They are right. You are smart enough to do this yourself. That is the wrong question. You don't have advisors because you're not smart. Advisors can make you smarter and should be teaching you to make you a wiser investor and to not second guess your behaviors that are successful, which is we usually have good plans, but we blow them up. I mean, we are our own worst enemy. We have advisors because of the fact that we want to get smarter quicker. I have a coach. You guys know me for a long time. The glass isn't even half full. It's 3/4 full for Joe all the time. I mean, I'm an optimist. Everybody's happy and holding hands, unicorns and rainbows. My coach is the glass is 1/4 full. She's very negative. My wife, my wife, Jonathan, does not like her personally. We don't hang out, but she's the perfect advisor for me. Most of us want advisors that agree with us. I don't need anybody to tell me, hey, Joe, you're awesome. I need somebody that goes, Joe, you're stepping in it. This book came out because I wrote a book and it took me 10 years to write it. And at the 7-year mark, Mary Lou goes, okay, I'm tired of this. I'm like, I'm tired of what? She goes, you've been talking about this damn book for 7 years. I want to stop talking about it. seriously, let's not bring it up anymore. So either write it or let's stop, because this is going nowhere. You are going nowhere on this topic. Let's just do something else. I'm like, no, I really want to write a book. She's like, well, stop talking, do it. And so I did. And by the way, I finished that book. I handed it to my alpha reader, my wife, Cheryl. She had it for like 18 minutes and said, this sucks.
Wow.
Ouch.
It was, oh, dude, it was horrible. But it was this like advice from on high. And don't get me wrong, the facts were right and all the facts are still stacked, but it was written from this standpoint that's not at all Stacking Benjamins, not at all me. You know, it wasn't fun. It wasn't conversational. And so the whole book needed to be changed. But anyway, back to advisors though. Mary Lou's a fantastic advisor because she looks at the world differently than I do. And I think to say that we shouldn't have those people in our life is baloney. We should all have those people that have our back in our life. And maybe that doesn't. And in the book, I talk about CFPs and I talk about fee-only advisors and I talk about how they charge. But I'm not worried here about any of that. I'm worried about this idea that you just fire people that are going to make you smarter. If your advisor, by the way, takes your stuff away from you and does magic tricks and you meet with them every 6 months or once a year, you need to fire those people. Because if they're not making you smarter, they're not truly somebody you need on your team. I'll give you an analogy.
What's interesting about this conversation, Joe, and I'll give it back to you in a second, is that, you know, that Brad and I have probably a different perspective than you on this question. So just because, you know, that's your opinion, it's not one that, like, it is not even nuanced enough for me in this conversation. So I'd love to actually dive into the nuance a little bit, but I would go so far as to say that in the absence of clear investigation as to what services are being rendered by an advisor and what that advisor is costing you, for the vast majority of people, they are overspending. And to Warren Buffett's quote, they are being helped out of all of their returns. I'm butchering his quote, but there is some nuance here that really needs to be nailed. So I'd love for you, because I know that your take is balanced, and I know that your take is like, here's how you are going to get the most value out of an advisor. But I don't think the carte blanche answer is like everybody should just work with an advisor. All advisors are equal. Just get an advisor because you can't do this yourself.
Oh, definitely
right?
not. No. And I think, Jonathan, to your point, here's where the problem really is. The problem really is, hey, I had an advisor. The advisor was horrible, did not help me at all. So the solution is I don't have advisors. No, the solution is that you're not good at interviewing and that you did a horrible job of picking advisors because that advisor was not in your corner. What you really need is people that make you smarter. And if your advisor doesn't, you need to fire them. And so a great analogy, actually, Jonathan, is Mary Barra at General Motors. You know, GM, I'm a Detroit guy, but GM is not the company anybody's talking about in automotive. They're talking about Tesla and Rivian, right? But Mary has a technology at GM now for vehicles that rivals everybody else's. And the fact that she's kept this old school Rust Belt company relevant is amazing. Mary, as CEO of her company, she has these VPs that run the different divisions around the car. Their job, they are smarter than she is at what they do. She doesn't show up and go, hey, car people, you guys work on this car thing for 6 months and come back to me and hopefully we've made a good one, which is the way we interface with our advisors. You can't do that. Mary needs to go to all the meetings. She needs to go to Camp Phi. She needs to read all the reading. She needs to listen to Choose FI. She needs to dive into it and know what she's doing herself. And then her advisor, like my Mary Lou, says, no, you're stepping in it, Mary, which is what her VP's job is to do. So you have to be an expert. And I feel like people think the advisor is between you and becoming an expert. And some of them are, a lot of them are. You need to fire those people. Those people do not make you better. But the idea, and this is my core idea, is that saying that you're not going to surround yourself with smart people who know you is ridiculous, is absolutely ridiculous.
No, I really appreciate that clarification. And I would even go so far as to say, just even a couple of minutes ago, you made the statement, you know, we all come up with plans and they're great plans, but then we blow them up.
Yeah.
We blow up our own plans. And so, you know, from your perspective, an advisor is someone that you are agreeing to a plan with. And then from that point on, they're holding your feet to the fire on that plan. Is that your take as well?
Absolutely. And you know what, Jonathan? This is hard, by the way. Finding good advisors is hard. And there's a bunch of people that have had advisors and they were crappy. They were horrible. You know, our friend, your co-author on the book, Chris Mamuel and I have had some wonderful discussions about the advisors that his parents had. And just to take something out of your book as an example, when you guys talk about advisors, Chris tells the wonderful story about how his parents' advisors were bleeding his parents dry. And a lot of people have heard the episodes where you guys talked about that with Chris. And so he recommended they get rid of them. What did Chris really do? Chris then said, I help them with their money. Chris says his parents don't have advisors. I would say Chris is his parents' advisor. He has their back. He argues with them. He makes them stronger. He takes it over. So it isn't that his parents don't have advisors. His parents have a killer advisor.
Yep.
Like if I could have Chris Mamula as my advisor.
I'll double down on that. Absolutely.
I know Chris and I fight like cats and dogs, which I love. We're willing to get in there and chat about stuff. And my relationship with Chris, just as a friend, makes me stronger. You know, that's the kind of person I'm talking about. And I think, by the way, Jonathan, I love that we're having this conversation because I'm hoping what people are hearing is I'm really talking about something different than what I think a lot of people think is a financial advisor. A financial advisor isn't somebody that takes your stuff and takes it away. You have to be the king. You cannot abdicate. Go to the meetings, show up for your own financial plan.
I'd love for you to, not to pull too much out of your book here, but since we said the key to this whole thing is interviewing your advisor or finding the right advisor, I'd love for you just to give us a little preview from your perspective of what approach you would take to vetting an advisor that would actually work with you and not be encouraging your abdication.
So there's a lot of places to get the basic questions, but I'm going to give you the stuff from my 16 years. You won't get anywhere else. And this is this. If you're meeting with them face to face, there are some clues even before you get in the room that they're the wrong advisor. Clue number one, you walk into the waiting area and they're playing CNBC or Fox Business on a big screen TV and Kramer's on yelling, sell, 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 sell. Because a real financial advisor is about helping you calm down and think about what you want, your goals. So I want to see like the Travel Channel. I want to see hopes and dreams. That's the first thing. If it's stock jockey, you need to run. Second thing is I never met a receptionist. And by the way, you don't even have to go into the office for this one. I never met a person that answered the phone, the receptionist, who was bitter where it didn't come from the boss. Meaning, if I walk in and the person at the front desk is treating me horribly or doesn't care or seems bad at their job, that comes directly from that person. Every office I walked into for 16 years where the receptionist sucked, the advisor sucked. Whenever the advisor was brilliant, the people around them were brilliant. By the way, if the advisor has the time to answer every phone call that comes in, you don't want to hire that person either, because they got nothing going on. You want somebody who's successful at their job and is in this deeper thought process. I also, if you meet with them face to face, I don't like the advisor that sits behind a desk with a high back chair while you sit in these uncomfortable little chairs across the desk from them. And they act like they're the king of everything and they're going to magically make your money. But no, I like the round table with a whiteboard and we're all on the same team together, much like King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Online, by the way, you can do the same thing with their website. You know, look at their website. Does the website talk about collaboration? Does it talk about, I'm going to feed you to make you smarter? Or does it talk about rates of return? Or does it talk about product? You know, here's a big early key. If your advisor leads with product and not process, you need to run. So if they've got a thing that's going to magically solve a goal that you haven't expressed to them yet, you got to get the hell out. Like that is bad.
I like that, Joe. And, you know, it's a lot of interpersonal stuff that can kind of give you a sense for, you know, how that advisor is going to be in a relationship, you know, a calming force, some sort of negative aspect to your team. The other thing I'm curious about is just because of the fragmentation of financial advice and the different directions that it goes and the pay structure that's associated with it, do you have any feelings, convictions about what is fair compensation or any filters that you would use for just when to run? You know, what is too much?
Yeah, this is actually a great question that when I helped put together an event for your book in Detroit, and when Chris came to visit, he and I had a couple of foamy beverages over this conversation. And this is the frustrating thing, Jonathan, where I'm not as helpful as maybe I could be here. But let me tell you why, because there's a big why that I can't really answer that question. Most people walk in and say, what do you charge? How much do you charge? That's like walking, I used a car analogy earlier. That's like walking in and saying, what's the car cost? Well, you know that a different car is going to cost a different amount of money, and it's based on what it does for you, right? So the first thing I want to ask is how is this relationship going to work? How often are we going to meet? What are you going to provide? What's the scope of service? And what are we going to do together? And then once I know what that is, then I hear what they charge. I do not like walking in and asking, what do you charge first? I like knowing, what kind of car is this? What are the features? Do I need those? Do I want those? Which means, by the way, I need to go into that advisor's office as a CEO, right? Most of us walk in, we're like, hey, my buddy works as advisor, so I'm going to find out what they do. And then they give me a sales pitch that sounds really good. And I hire them, and it ends up being a huge mistake because of the fact that I didn't go in with, I'm the CEO and here's what I need. So once I know what I need, do you fit that framework? And then once I know that, then I ask the fee. I will tell you this, that if they charge a percentage of assets, that means that you're getting asset management with their scope of business. And there's a lot of people in our community who aren't looking for that at all. So if they charge a number versus a percentage, generally for a lot of people, that's the way that you want to go. If you want to delegate the asset management to somebody, you need to realize that that is optional. A lot of advisors don't do that. So before you get into a percent fee game, you really want to ask yourself, do I want to hand over the investment reins? And for some people they do, for some people they don't. So I would look for a flat fee first and then decide if I want asset management second.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you, Joe. Is, assets under management, that fee is understandably vilified in our community to a large degree, right? Because
Sure.
you think about what percentage of your overall net worth that's going to ultimately take away, if you will, over a 30, 50-year period. And it's way more significant than a lot of people would consider.
Yeah, 1% skim. I mean, think about a 1% skim for a 30-year period of time.
Right. And it sounds innocuous, right? When you hear it, oh, it's only 1%.
Right. You get to keep 99, Brad.
Right.
Does anybody else want to know what that would be? I mean, it's like 30% of your portfolio over 40 years. Is that accurate, Brad?
Yeah, it's somewhere not too far off from that. I could definitely run the numbers, but yeah, that's not a bad back of the envelope calculation in terms of, right, it's just 1% is what you hear, but it's going to lower your overall net worth, over that significant time period by, somewhere on the order of 25%.
By a lot.
Yeah. So, I mean, Joe, this is kind of a blanket question, and I don't necessarily love that, but like assets under management, somebody hears, oh, I'm charging 1.5%. Like, is there a line of delineation where you would say run, right? You've used that term a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't like any number over 1, and I don't love 1. I certainly don't like 1. I mean, I like closer to a 0.5% number if they're going to do assets under management. But listen, the reason I talk so much about investing and the basics of investing in this book is because I think that it's so easy. I mean, I have 3 chapters, but just go read J.L. Collins' book. Don't read my book for the investing stuff. Read J.L. Collins' book and realize that you don't need the investing portion. You really, truly don't. Some people don't trust themselves. And hey, if you don't trust yourself and you want that person managing it for you, realize there's going to be a fee associated with that. You know what this comes back to, Brad? This is a discussion I also like, which is there are people that really like security that I meet. And they love security. They love this idea of a paycheck that they can't outlive. And when you talk about a pension through work, we honor that. We're like, ooh, you were with the government, you get a pension forever. But when we talk about creating our own pension, that sounds awesome until we tell you what that is. It's an annuity, right? An annuity is where you're creating a pension. An annuity, a lot of us know, maybe some people don't know, is hella expensive. You pay hella expensive for security. So realize, just like when you add on the electric seats and the Scotch Guard to your car, you add on all these bells and whistles, you put Sirius satellite radio in your car, the more bells and whistles that you add to get the security of somebody looking over your shoulder, the more it's going to become more expensive and more expensive and more expensive.
Thank you, Joe. This has been, I've really appreciated your perspective on this. And I think what I'm hearing, and you may not agree to this one-to-one, but my takeaway from, what you've laid out for us is the 2 models that are out there are flat fee models and assets under management model. And there's some hybrids and there's a few other things that are out there. But the 2 primary choices are, you could pay some form of a flat fee or flat fee plus a prescription, or you could, on the top of that, you may end up with some sort of assets under management. I think all of us on this call would be predisposed to the flat fee model or the flat fee plus some sort of subscription model. The assets under management, there's, in my mind, I kind of line up on this as well. I would be running from anything that was over a 0.5% assets under management.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of just a couple things that I would use as kind of like a top line filter. And I'll give this back to you. Go ahead.
Let me give you just one more, Jonathan, which is if the investment, if they tell you it's free, which I hear a lot. Yeah.
How much are your services? It's free. It's free. I'll send you a Christmas card.
I mean, yeah, the three of us are laughing at this, but there are people that go, no. They said it was free. I pay nothing. You do pay. There is no investment out there where you don't pay. So there's fees baked in. They're hidden. Annuities, go back to annuities, look like they're free. It's all baked in, but it is some ugly feeage on the inside of that. So there's that third model that I don't want people to forget about.
I'm glad you mentioned that. And then, so you're saying don't go in with the cost. From my perspective, it's like, I don't want to know about all the features of the car until I have some sense. I don't want to go look for a house until I have some sense of what my range should be. I don't want to get too emotionally attached to the kitchen upgrades until I'm kind of anchored to how much is this going to cost? Because you're going to get into a relationship even in that investigation. But I agree with you. There's an aspect of this of there's some nuance to this, right? There's some nuance. But in my mind, I'm having all of those filters there. Then the next piece of this, which I'll be honest, are sorely lacking, is this is going to be a team member. This is someone that's going to be working with me for a long time. What are the interpersonal aspects of finding someone that is going to hold me accountable, but do it the right way? And I think you provide, just on this show, but also in your book, some brilliant tips on extending that out and really getting to the heart of finding that person that's going to be an advocate for you, be working with you, going to be working with you, a long time.
Can I just say one thing about that too, which is there are people out there that, you're not ready for that fee discussion. You're not ready for that type of advisor. Find a smart person who's walked in your shoes before. And here's the cost. Take them to breakfast. I mean, this is a great advisor to start with. Take a smart person to breakfast who's walking the path ahead of you that you want to walk down. This is what I'm talking about, advisors. And we got into the fees and, make sure they're a certified financial planner, that they're a fiduciary. Erase all that. Just surround yourself with smart people that know you personally. And I think you're going to kick ass.
I love it. All right, Joe, I want to just give you a second to tell everybody about your book and then remind them where they can find out more about the World Domination Tour.
Thanks, dude. This has been so fun. We don't do this enough. And I've been thinking, it's been a while. Jonathan, you've been on our show in forever, and Brad's never been on SB. So we got to get that done. But yeah, the book is Stacked, Your Super Serious Guide to Modern Money Management. If you read a lot of personal finance books, the last quarter of the book is where the gold is for you, because we do it like the Cub Scouts. You get achievements, and the heavy duty achievements are in the back. If you read a lot of personal finance books, by the way, I'm an on-ramp. My goal is to try to widen the field and make fewer people cry about their money. Our book is much more for somebody as a guide that is just starting out than it is for, I'll tell you, the few negative reviews we've gotten is I read a lot of personal finance books and I go, oh boy, oh boy, because I'm not talking to you. I'm clowning around. I'm having fun. I'm making it approachable. And if you're looking for advice per minute, I'm not your dude. But yeah, for everybody else, Stacked, get it at your library. The audiobook is fun. My mom is on the audiobook. That's a long story. There's interviews at the end of every chapter with people that are experts in that chapter. So you'll hear the interviews on the audiobooks. You can read them in the book itself.
Did you narrate your audiobook?
I did.
Oh, that would be so fun. That would be so fun.
If you like saying the same phrase 37 times, because apparently I can't say things the right way.
Well, I'm sure they got cropped in the editing room though, right? Yes. Fun to listen to, not fun to record.
That's right. Yeah, it was brutal. But yeah, I'm very proud of it.
Awesome, man.
Oh, and come visit us, stackingbenjamins.com/stacked. Come hang out with other like-minded people in your community. I know you already do it. By the way, Sarah and Maggie with the Choose FI group in Fort Lauderdale were flipping amazing. They actually did our event in Lauderdale. Wow. So find your local group of money nerds in the Choose FI community. And yeah, then I'll come hang out and drink a few beers with me.
Sarah and Maggie, thank you so much. Amazing. That's amazing. And so everyone listening to this, Joe is going to be heading towards the Northeast. This is coming out right around the 28th of March, and Joe's going to be heading to the Northeast. So definitely go to stackingbenjamins.com/stacked to find a location near you. Joe, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
You guys are awesome. Thanks so much.
All right, my friends, the fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.